Hi, today's channel is about the Russia-Ukraine event. So it's topical, so I thought this would be something good to channel on. I didn't really have a question, so instead I suppose you could say, I could ask it as a question. We could say, what is the channel perspective? No, actually that won't work. I'm just going to make a statement, okay? This is going to be a channeled perspective of the current Russia-Ukraine event. And I don't really know what the content is going to be, so I'm just going to leave it to the team that come through and see what they have to say about it, okay? Greetings and thank you for the statement this time, other than the usual question we receive from you. So, we do have a perspective, and let us share that with you for then you to decide for yourself what to make from it. The statement was a channeled perspective of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Let us start by saying, it does not serve you, nor humanity, nor the one, for you or anyone to hold energies within your beingness which are derived from the darkness end of the spiritual spectrum. As we have discussed many times, you are a being completely of the light because you are derived from the One. And the One's true essence is the light and nothing but the light. In the lexicon of human emotion, this is love and its derivatives. So, if you are holding any emotional state which is not love and its derivatives, then you are misconceiving of who you actually are. And this misconception means that you are holding emotional states, or you are holding energetic states which are literally not you, but is a belief that you are something which you are not. So the way that this would manifest in regard to what is occurring in Ukraine is that possibly you or others are holding anger or hatred or malice in their hearts towards one particular side of this event. And if a person has been persuaded by the narrative, then this darkness they will hold will be aimed at Russia, the Russian people, the Russian leadership. But it does not serve you, it does not serve the greater humanity, it does not serve the One for you to hold these emotional states, whether it is for Russia, or this event, or something else. Your return to the One is a realization that you are the One. And to realize that you are the One means that you must be fully identified with the light, which means you are fully identified with what you really are, which means you are fully identified with the One. But that is a very macro perspective. Looking more at a nuanced microcosm of what is occurring here, understand that there is a unified malevolence which has taken a great deal of dominion over the planet and humanity. And yet they will never be satisfied until their dominion is absolutely comprehensive. And every single individual will have every detail of their lives controlled from the moment they are born until the moment they are no longer alive. And even to the point that the end of someone's life may not be an organic process or of their choice, but rather when the system has determined their usefulness has been depleted. And so they are literally deleted by the system. This is where the darkness wishes to take humanity. Very central to their strategy is to create division. And so as long as there is division among the population which they control, then there is no unification. And when there is no unification, it is very easy for them to maintain a control, because they only need to maintain control over smaller groups which have been engineered to identify with a small number. And as they are a small number, their unified might is not enough to be a threat to this unified malevolence seeking dominion. So, the apparatus of information dissemination on your planet is under the control of this unified malevolence. Therefore, if you are holding an opinion which is a direct result of consuming that information, then it is very likely you are going to hold an opinion which is not organic, but is rather a form of programming. So, as we speak now, and you are ascertaining that we are saying there is not a need to have a hatred for Russia, for a condemnation of Russia in what is occurring here. For some who are watching now, this will be very difficult to hear, because they have a very strong feeling that Russia is doing the wrong thing. However, if you are a free-thinking being, then when you hear an opinion which may be contrary to what you are currently holding, you do not reject it, but instead you allow it to be heard, so that the possibility that you will learn something which was unknown to take you to a higher level of understanding and demonstration of wisdom, so that you remain open. So this is a possibility. However, if you, upon hearing something which is resembling a counter position or a counter opinion, or opinion which is not aligned with what you have taken into yourself, and your feeling or reaction is to immediately reject it and even cut off any possibility of it entering you, then this is not the characteristic of a free-thinking being, but rather the characteristic of a being which has been programmed to think in a certain way. And part of this programming is to reject anything which is not aligned with the programming, with the indoctrination. So, we say this early in this channel because we invite you to be open. And even though what we say may be counter to what you feel very strongly about, we wish to say to you that we are here for the one. We are here for the truth. We are here for the light. And this is synonymous with saying we are here for you. And we do not wish to indoctrinate you into any belief, but rather we just wish to open a greater expanse of possibility, and for you to have the freedom and the space to critically think and analyze and construct a version of reality which is organic, which is aligned with the truth, the light, the one. This unified malevolence that has taken dominion over the planet, although yet not reaching its ultimate vision of totally comprehensive control, is very secretive and has worked very hard for a long time to remain anonymous. They also have been very successful in consolidating wealth, power, and authority into the hands of a few. Because relative to the population of your planet, their numbers are very, very, very few. Much, much less than a single percentage of the global population. And yet, their control is very disproportionate to their numbers. As their control is done mostly surreptitiously, secretly, nefariously, then there is little awareness of their existence. There is some awareness amongst those who have reached a stage in their awakening where they have sought this information, and also those who have themselves also formed groups which are very powerful, and yet they represent the light. And they themselves for a long time have also, as a legacy, been working for the light, and in a sense having an energetic battle with this unified malevolence. And for most of this time, the unified malevolence has prevailed. But the unified light, this group or these groups that have decided that it is a time to bring an end to this malevolent secrecy, this unified malevolence which has been plotting to create an absolute comprehensive dominion over the globe which is saturated in darkness, have been playing a very long and thoughtful and strategic plan. And this plan now has reached a point where it is about to breach the threshold and going from something which has been happening in the background beyond the awareness of the greater population of the world into a place where it is now becoming a feature of the world where those who are at the level of just the normal human being living their normal lives are now becoming aware of this greater energetic battle. And many of the greater human population are now able to make the choice to join and become part of this force of light, this unification. So, as this push, this unification, bridges the threshold, then the force at which it acts is going to be enough to cause disruption on a global scale. It is going to deconstruct the darkness and the system of control that the unified malevolence, this darkness, has constructed over a very long time. And this deconstruction is going to be demonstratively occurring and visible to humanity. And when it does occur, the media, the governments, the forces which are still within the control of this unified malevolence are going to paint it in a way which is not a true representation of what is actually going on. And they will use their very calculated, strategic and intelligent way to get those who are still not yet awake to what is occurring, still not have realized that there is something breaking through the threshold. So now that there is an energetic dynamic going on, which has become polaric, literally the darkness and the light, having a tussle in a way as the light steps into its own and eventually will overwhelm the darkness and snuff the darkness out, so that the earth and humanity cross a threshold of its own from the third into the fourth density, leaving this polaric energetic state of darkness and the light to become a unification entirely of the light. Those that are not aware that this process is occurring still can be persuaded to identify with the darkness by holding a hatred or an anger or a malice in their hearts for a part of humanity. And this identification with the darkness is literally turning oneself into an animating a beacon which is emitting this dark energy. And this unified malevolence, which has used humanity as a resource for a very long time, as part of this resource methodology, has been harvesting dark energy from the human population for a very long time. And the way that this is done is they deliberately engineer suffering into the human population, such that the human population identifies with the darkness very easily. There is anger, despondence, hatred, fear, and so on. And these are dark energies. And when one holds these dark energies, then they vibrate with this energy and they emit this energy. And those that are unified around the polaric end of the spiritual spectrum, which is darkness, are able to harvest that energy, which makes themselves more powerful. So, as they feel threatened by this emergence of the light, then they will do everything they can to maintain their power through the darkness. And therefore, they will attempt to get as many people as possible within the global population to identify with the darkness, to hold a hatred and a fear and an anger towards whatever they can find will be most effective for this to occur. And currently, what is most effective is to have the population of the world to be very focused on Russia and to have a hatred in their hearts for Russia, and also have a fear and a sense of despising the very existence of Russia. This generates a dark energy which they harvest and use to cling on to their power, to maintain their strength. Because within the physical paradigm, there is power derived from darkness. If one is willing to go deep into darkness to achieve their objectives, then this gives them a power which is greater than one who is not willing to go into darkness. If you are not willing to commit violence to achieve an objective, but your competitor is willing to commit violence to achieve an objective, and this is violence which is not one defending oneself against an unjust attack, but instead using violence to intimidate and to threaten and to beat down a competitor such that you can dominate. The individual that is willing to do this are going to be more competitive and more successful in this pathway than one who has chosen to follow the light and being a being of non-violence. And so this can be extrapolated to the extreme, where one is willing to go into darkness to an extent where they will literally create events, engineer events, but make them appear to be organic, that result in the deaths of hundreds of thousands or even millions of people. So, it does not serve you, humanity, the planet, the One, for you to contribute to them, this unified malevolence, any energetic supplement which they can harvest to intensify their power within the physical realm through the philosophical path of darkness. Because the manifestation of their heightened power through darkness is a greater degree of suffering and chaos and confusion on your planet. Therefore, if you are holding any emotional states which are from the darkest end of the spectrum towards Russia, we encourage you to let them go. And instead, be a being entirely of the light. Hold emotional states only of love and its derivatives. And also, remain open about what is actually occurring in the Russia-Ukraine event. Be aware that this unified malevolence has taken control of the cultural pillars, those cultural forces which are most effective in shaping the minds and hearts of the population. Because they are few. And if they are going to march humanity from a place of relative freedom, which it enjoyed many thousands of years ago, into a perpetual prison from which there is no escape, then this requires a dramatic and extreme degree of control. Therefore, all of the main instruments of control have been infiltrated, have been taken over, and are now part of their weapons chest. So, if you hold an opinion which is the same opinion as the greater media, and government, then consider, is this a true opinion? Or have I been programmed to have this opinion through the cultural pillars, through the main instruments of influence over the hearts and minds of humanity? Now, before we go further, let us also say, we are not saying that one side of this conflict is in the right or the wrong. We are not giving you an opinion about which side to choose. Instead, what we are saying is be open to the possibility that what you believe is in fact incorrect. You have been the victim of a false narrative for a very long time, because it is only through the false narrative, through deception, that humanity can be marched from freedom into servitude. If the story that was told through these main instruments of influence was truthful, and thereby being truthful was telling you and all others within the human population that what is actually occurring is your progression from freedom into increasingly diminished freedom until you are locked in the box from which there is no escape, and those that are orchestrating it will reign supreme as the gods and goddesses over the human population forever, and your progeny will be born into shackles, into servitude from which there is no escape. Clearly, if the instruments of influence were telling the truth, then humanity would not agree with this, would not go along with this, would reject this, and would put in a concerted effort to find those responsible so they can be neutralized and held accountable. So, the truth is very counter to the objectives of this unified malevolence, which has and seeks dominion, greater dominion, over the human population. Therefore, when you are absorbing information about the world, be very careful about where that information comes from. Is it coming from one of these cultural instruments, these cultural pillars, which have been infiltrated and taken control of by this unified malevolence? If your answer to that question is yes, then it is very likely that your beliefs about what is occurring are false, are a deliberate contrivance so that their agenda can continue to progress without your interference, without your awareness. So, perhaps instead, seek information that is coming from sources which are outside of this apparatus of control, that are, at their core, motivated by the light, motivated by characteristics of the light, which include an insatiable thirst for the truth. There are now small information sources which don't hold the grandstand or the spotlight of the television, for example, but yet are of much greater value in regard to the propensity for truth and the no motivation for misrepresentation. Those that are at the beating heart of these organizations, some which are a single person, others which are a team, themselves have an insatiable thirst for the truth, as they themselves are moving to the light and becoming more characteristic of the light, purging the darkness. They have a thirst for the truth, and also characteristic of the light is a desire to share what one has, because there is an increasing identification of all others as themselves, as the unity of the single being, which is the truth. It is the ultimate truth, because ultimately everything is the one, the single being. So it is a unity on a universal scale. Everything is the one thing. It is the ultimate unity. But there are unities embedded within unities. And so the individual human is embedded within the humanity being, a unity of all humanity. And when one begins to move to the light, there is an increasing identification, a kindredness that is felt with fellow human beings. And so if you are answering your insatiable thirst for the truth and discovering truths, then there is no desire to hoard them for oneself, but instead there is an urge to share them with this greater identification of who you are, sharing it with the unity of which you are a part. So, when you find these sources, you'll have a more clarified perspective of what is really occurring on your planet, not just in this current event, but in most globally significant events. And you will begin to realize that what these cultural instruments, these cultural pillars, have been telling you is occurring is in fact a contrivance, a attempt to instill into you beliefs which are in fact untrue, but serve the unified malevolence. And this is going to occur more and more as events occur, which are the direct result of these groups who are unified to the light and have for a long time been working towards this place where the darkness will, this unified malevolence, which have taken the philosophical path of darkness, are eventually neutralized, will mean there is going to be more and more and more events which are of global significance. Because now, as there is reaching this end game, it is no longer little moves, because these little moves are now culminating after much organization and planning into grand moves. And these grand moves cannot be hidden. They will be on the global stage for all to see. And when they do occur, these cultural pillars, the instruments of influence which are within the dominion of the unified malevolence, the empire of darkness, the cabal of darkness, will paint them as something utterly different to what they are. And in a binary sense, if there could be said that there are good guys and bad guys, then these instruments of cultural influence will swap this identification and call the good guys the bad guys and call the bad guys the good guys, in the most basic way that this will appear to those who are awakening. However, we say don't decide on that simplistic basis. Instead, what our advice to you is, our suggestion, is that you remain open and undecided. So when the cultural pillars begin to say that this event is this way, that it means this, that these players represent this and that you do not take that on and absorb it into your identity as your belief system, but instead remain open and be mindful that these mainstream platforms have an agenda which is not the dissemination of truth, but instead to move humanity further to the culmination of the vision of the cabal of darkness, which is complete and total comprehensive dominion over Earth and its human population. So, remain open and seek the truth. Don't allow it to be implanted into your mind by those forces which have the greatest access. Instead, search for the truth. Look for those sources which are honoring the light, and speak from a place which is in service to the One. And by being in service to the One, meaning they are in service to the truth. They are in service to humanity. They are in service to you. And through this process, which takes longer than the instant input which comes from the mainstream, where an event occurs and within moments they are telling you which opinion to have, because they are fearful that you will form your own opinion through critical rationalization, which is counter to what their agenda requires for its further advancement. And also they are fearful that you will receive ideas about the event from sources outside of their control. And this is why the news is so ubiquitous on your planet. Why there are continuous news breaks. Why there are channels entirely dedicated to news 24/7. Because it is so important for this small unified benevolence, the cabal of darkness, to always be in control of what opinion you hold, what your beliefs are, what it is that fills your mind. And so they have literally saturated your societies with their version of reality. But now is the time of awakening. Now is the time to emancipate yourself from that system and realize that it does not exist to serve you, but instead to program you to become compliant with the agenda, which culminates in servitude for you, your progeny, humanity, for all time. And this emancipation means that you must give up the desire to instantly know, to instantly have an opinion. and instead accept that in this environment where there is a unified malevolence that is deliberately using great influence to create a false narrative matrix, a contrived vision of the world, such that what it is very different from what you are told it is. And therefore, for you to have a more clarified sense of what is actually occurring is going to take time, effort, energy to navigate through this sea of misinformation and deliberate deception, diversion, to find what the truth really is. What is the reality of your world, of your life. And the reward will be that you will have a more clarified understanding of what is occurring on your planet and within your country, within your community, within one's own life. And with this greater sense of clarity, then it becomes easier to become a being completely of the light and to purge the darkness, no longer misconceiving of self as a being which is also of the dark, and realizing that you are a being entirely of the light. And this realization is a diminishment in the power of the unified malevolence, the cabal of darkness, because you no longer emit an energy which they can harvest. And so increasingly they diminish. Increasingly they lose control, until eventually they are completely neutralized. And the One's agenda will once again take dominance on the Earth planet, within the human population. And those that are ready will ascend into the fourth density, where they will begin the new human experience as a completely new species, birthed into the light in an unprecedented way, because it shall have passed through a gauntlet of darkness which has never been experienced before. And this unique experience will give the new human species an understanding of what it means to be the light in an experiential sense, which will be unique, profound, and make it a source of great wisdom for the cosmos. Thank you, and we love you.